My name is Max Grunig with Pocasito, and you notice if you're on Zoom, you notice he's wearing a mask. So we're actually in a hybrid event. We have people in person in the room. I just want to welcome you. This is Beyond Fossil Fuels, talking about I'm very excited to open this. I'll keep it very brief. Just so you know, we have the opening session where we also, both from speakers on Zoom and online and in the room here, sorry. And then we have a first session on fossil fuel exit, talking about coal, gas, oil, and what it means leaving these behind, both in Colorado and in Germany. And then we have a session talking about new employment, new jobs, new opportunities. And there we have also speakers from both sides. And then we have a third session talking about the social side or the equity side of the transition. Very important. And of course, all these sessions have overlap. So they're not completely separated. They have a lot of connections. And I do hope you'll see these. And we'll also have a final closing session at the end where we will be able to connect all the sessions, hopefully in a meaningful way. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to the German Foreign Office, represented here by the Vice Consul General of the Consulate in Los Angeles, Dirk Schulz. Thank you so much for joining us here today, for being here in the room with us. And I hope you can just address the people both on Zoom and in the room with a few welcoming remarks this morning. Feel free to come up here. I want to thank you personally for making this possible. Wonderful. The best place. It's the best place in the house. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. Grüning, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants. On behalf of the German Consulate General in Los Angeles, it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to our conference under the title Beyond Fossil Fuels, Just Transition in Colorado and Germany. The dates for this conference here in this wonderful city of Denver, and for the two similar conferences in Phoenix and in Los Angeles in the days ahead, have been well determined by our project partner Pocasito. The simultaneous Glasgow Climate Change Conference has made clear for us, we as mankind have a serious problem to maintain our planet as a sustainable place to live for our children, grandchildren, and all the generations to follow. Climate change is real. Every government in every country has to take far-reaching measures to limit global warming effectively. This applies to the US, to China, Russia, and India, as well as to all the smaller countries like Germany, especially because we, as Germany, as a very developed and industrialized nation, depend so much on energy, which is affordable and clean as well. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things I remember well of my late grandmother were her stories about very severe winters in Eastern Germany, with great quantities of snow, frozen lakes, and constantly low temperatures for weeks and months. I myself had those experiences during my childhood as well, but already it was not the case every single year. There were cold winters and there were wild winters. We took that as changing weather, but that tendency continued. And nowadays, for my own kids, the winters in Berlin are usually more or less cold with more or less rain, but snow becomes increasingly rare. I personally do not need sophisticated meteorological statistics to relate this development to a serious climate change instead of just bad weather. Another memory from my childhood was that big rivers in Germany, like the River Rhine in Cologne and the River Elbe in Hamburg, where I was born, were so contaminated by wastewater from the industry that nobody imagined to swim in those waters, unless someone wanted to commit suicide. And here is the good thing, which gives hope. Today, people in Hamburg or in Cologne regularly go swimming in the rivers during summertime when the weather is appropriate. And the only danger for the swimmers derives from big ships passing by and not from the substances within the water. I take this as an example which gives hope. A change to the better is possible as long as committed political leadership and capable engineers work hand in hand in order to find sustainable solutions which preserve nature and improve living conditions for humans and animals alike. Ladies and gentlemen, in Germany, we find in the polls great support for a new climate policy, especially now that we are building a new government and it's the main subject for the negotiations to build this new coalition. But this is always not only individual costs which make cuts, we often have a different picture. People fear higher gas prices in Germany as in the United States. They fear that traveling with low-cost airlines will no longer be possible. And they fear sometimes as well that they might lose their jobs. These are all very sensitive political questions which politicians have to consider and take care of. A just balance between different interests and needs has to be found and must be introduced into a democratic process. Germany and the United States of America are two nations depending largely on industrial production, high mobility, and social cohesion. Therefore, the process which shall allow the substitution of fossil fuels must be a just transition. It must be just on the one hand, and it must be transitional on the other hand. Today, we will hear much more on the different aspects involved in this process. This conference will give our US partners some insights into the German discussion. We all know that things in the US are different compared to Germany, but it is always helpful to compare in order to open up new perspectives and give new impulses for the discussions in the respective countries. I would like to conclude my brief remarks by thanking Mr. Grünig and Pokasito for all their work they put into this project. I would like to thank as well the City of Denver and the Alliance Center for hosting us. And last but not least, I would like to mention Honorary Consul Miracle, who unfortunately cannot be with us today, for his good advice during the preparation of this conference. And last but not least, I express my gratitude to all you participants here in Colorado and in Germany and around the world. Said this, I wish us all a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dirk Schulz, for these opening remarks. We have more opening remarks, and I want to introduce Brenna, Simmons, and Onge. She is the director of the Alliance Center, so our host here today. Thank you so much for making this possible. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for welcoming us today at the Alliance Center.
Thank you, Max. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. As Max said, my name is Brenna Simmons St. Onge. I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance Center. And it's a particularly special day to be here with you in person. So thank you for those of you in here today, in the room today. And thank you for those of you joining us all across the state, all across the world. It's really wonderful that we are able to host a hybrid event. So as you see the folks around you, know that there is an entire community tuning in across Colorado and in Germany today to experience the same event with you. So the Alliance Center, as Max said, we're hosting an event today, but it has been organized and put on by our friends at Pocosito and would not have happened without the incredible leadership of Max. So thank you very much, Max. I think some of you are familiar with the Alliance Center, but for those of you who aren't, I'd like to take just a few minutes to share with you a bit more about who we are and what we do. And one of our new bodies of work that is particularly relevant to the concept of a just transition. So the Alliance Center was founded in 2004, and we really exist to bring people together to solve systemic problems. And we do that in a number of different ways. One way is actually through this building that you're in right now. We call it our living laboratory. And it has 6 different LEED certifications over the years. And right now is the highest scored building in Colorado for existing buildings and maintenance. And what makes that a unique achievement is that it was built in 1908. So you're in a very historic old building that is operating at the peak of its performance to reduce the environmental impact, and then also increase human health and wellness and the connective tissue between the sustainability network here in Colorado. The building is also home to our tenant community. So we serve and support over 50 different organizations that call the Alliance Center home. And they come here every day. Well, they used to come here every day before the pandemic. Now some come during the day and they join a lot virtually. As you can imagine, it's changed a lot for us over the last 18 months. But we still have a committed community of tenants who call the Alliance home. And we actually track the impact of our tenants to the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations to make sure that their local work and our local work has global relevance. Another way that we actually address climate change and look at a just transition is through our network. So over the last 18 years, the Alliance Center has built an intentional network of government, academia, for-profit, nonprofit, and we convene this network to identify some of the largest problems that we're facing, provide thought leadership in what solutions could be, and wherever possible, we move thought leadership into action with community-led solutions. So as you can imagine, community-led solutions look different over the years. And one of our current bodies of work that I want to share with you today is called the Regenerative Recovery Coalition. And this is a new initiative that we launched in response to the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit last year, we realized through our network that everybody, ourselves included, were focusing on crisis mitigation. We are focusing on that immediate problem right in front of us while COVID ravaged the very systems that govern our lives. And what we saw was missing was a long-term plan, a strategic plan to build Colorado forward, because we knew that going back to normal was not an option. Normal was broken. Normal didn't work for the people, and it certainly didn't work for the environment. So we convened our network last year to hear from citizens, to crowdsource ideas and solutions from everyday Coloradans about what is the future they want coming out of the pandemic to build forward. We actually gathered all those solutions, turned it into a report called a guidebook for a regenerative recovery. And through working with community, we defined that of regenerative recovery as a robust, localized that meets human needs abundantly, provides all the we need to not just survive, but also thrive. And the coalition formed a year ago. So it's 1 year old this month. So happy birthday, coalition. We now have over 330 members all across the state. And members, so about 170 are organizations. And within those organizations, jobs in Colorado force. There are about 22,000 extraction-based jobs in Colorado. So the support of the coalition for this vision of a regenerative future and fossil fuels here in our state. So just a bit more about this project, and then I'll pass it on. But there are 3 main ways that we drive action as a coalition. One way is working with the administration, so working with our governor and his state agencies here in Colorado, and elected officials to help guide and craft the state's recovery plan and advance policies that incentivize a regenerative recovery for our state. The second way we drive action is accelerating the work of our members. So within our 330 members, there is so much amazing work going on. and a lot of work happening within the just transition here in Colorado. The third way we drive action is by implementing projects and leading projects that we've identified are gaps in our state towards a vision of a regenerative future. One of those projects is focused on a just transition. So we're looking at a just transition for oil and gas. So in Colorado, there's estimates about 21,000 fossil fuel oil and gas jobs in the state, and about 1,000. So in 2020, there was 1,118 coal jobs in Colorado. So we're looking at the job set in Colorado, the industry, the workforce of Colorado and fossil fuel extractions, and how do we actually transition that to be a climate change solution? So there's three parts to that project that I'll share with you very briefly. The first part is, again, looking at policy. So how do we incentivize the clean energy economy? And what I mean by that would be distributed energy, renewable energy, battery storage, electrification, weatherization. So it's not just solar panels. There's a whole industry around the clean energy economy. And part of our work with policy every year is to advance and accelerate policies that will incentivize a clean energy economy in Colorado and create a demand for skilled labor and the skilled trades. The second part of that strategy is then to destigmatize the skilled trades. There is a stigma in Colorado and in America, I don't know what it's like in Germany, about being a skilled trade, a plumber, an electrician. These are high paid, well-respected, needed jobs. As we look at the infrastructure changes that need to happen over the next 2 decades, it is the skilled trades that will be needed every day to make that happen. So we need to invest in them. So we're working on a campaign to destigmatize the skilled trades in Colorado and promote them as a viable, successful career path. The third part of the project is looking at a tip-to-tail workforce development pipeline, where we're targeting job seekers in oil and gas extraction communities, coal communities, emerging job seekers coming out of high school, and our communities of color who are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic job losses. So we're working with target populations to recruit them, upskill them, reskill them in a workforce development pipeline, working with a community college network and a network of other credentialing agencies into the clean energy economy. And then on the other side of the pipeline, we're working with industry partners through the Colorado Solar and Storage Association and over 200 plus employers in the clean energy economy. So once we can upskill and reskill the workforce, they have a home to land in clean energy economy jobs. So as you can imagine, that is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to share with our work in that project, but I just wanted to share a little bit about the Regenerative Recovery Coalition and our workforce development project. You'll actually hear from 3 of our coalition members today to showcase some of their work. So as I wrap up, I just want to leave you with one final thought. Our jobs are more than just our jobs. They don't define us. They don't create our identity, but they give us a sense of purpose. They help us understand our place in society, how we contribute to the world. They're how we provide for our families and feed our children and care for our loved ones. And as we transition away from fossil fuels, we are telling thousands of people that their jobs are the problem. Therefore, they are the problem. That's alienating, that's disempowering, that's going to make people want to fight and have conflict. So how can we look at a just transition? How can we look at workforce as a climate change solution in a way that doesn't leave anybody behind? In a way that drills down and understands the story of the coal miner's daughter and the legacy of her family, all the way up to regional economic diversification as we accelerate the transition to a clean energy economy. So I'm so excited to be here with you today. I'm really looking forward to hearing from all the speakers, both local and abroad. Thank you very much for joining us. Happy to connect with all of you later. Thank you so much, Max. And with that, I'll leave you on.
And we will switch over to our first online presenter, speaker, participant. I want to ask Heidi Binkle to join us on stage, basically. Heidi, if you're ready, I know you're in Virginia, actually. Heidi Binkle is the executive director and co-founder of the Just Transition Fund. And she's active in a lot of regions where just transition is happening or should be happening. Good morning, Heidi, and welcome to our webinar. And I hope you are able to see and hear us okay.
Good morning, Max, and good morning, everyone. I actually used to live out in Colorado and I worked in Denver, so I know the Alliance Center well, and I've been in that room many, many, many times. So anyway, it's great to be here with you. And Max, I can hear and see everyone just fine.
Great. And if you want to, we can start playing the video clip. We can try it at least on our end, or did you want to say a few introductory words first?
Yeah, maybe I'll just say just a really quick introduction, and then you can go ahead and play the video. So again, good morning, everyone. I'm Heidi Binkle. I am the executive director and co-founder of the Just Transition Fund, and we work nationally across the United States to help coal communities that in places where either coal plants or mines either have or will close, make the transition to a new energy economy. And as Max knows, when he and I were chatting about this event, we actually launched the fund in 2015. And one of the first things that we did in 2016 was take a delegation of US coal community leaders to Germany to learn from the German experience. So we have a short film that he's about to show you. You know, at this point, I actually think, Max, it's funny. We were in Germany almost 5 years to the date today. So you'll see, you know, some of the statistics and whatnot on natural gas are a little bit dated, but I think that the spirit of collaboration and learning is really still relevant no matter what. So Max, I think if you want to start with that video, I think that sort of sets the scene nicely, and then I can make some additional remarks.
We are visiting right now a redevelopment of one of the largest coal mines in the western part of Germany.
We're in Dortmund. They have created a lake from an old industrial site as a transition project.
In Germany and the United States, coal still plays an important role as an energy source. Nevertheless, the sector is employing fewer and fewer people. Why? Mining coal releases heavy metals, which is harmful for people and the environment. Burning coal also produces huge amounts of greenhouse gases that speed climate change. Coal plants are also shutting down because of market factors that give an edge to more profitable energy sources like natural gas and renewables.
Even though many people in Kentucky don't necessarily agree on things like climate change, the world is moving in a certain direction. We have to respond to that in a way that doesn't leave the people behind that are most directly affected.
Coal helped power the Industrial Revolution and the transformation of our economies. This heritage is a source of pride for many communities, and the transition away from coal is no easy task.
We've heard from people here that there is life after coal. These are people who are very, very proud of their coal heritage, which is very similar to what we see back home in Central Appalachia.
Some former coal regions have already started to reinvent themselves. In Essen, Germany, an old mine was transformed into a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In neighboring Dortmund, a former steel plant site was converted into a nanotechnology hub and recreation area. A family-owned company in Bochum went from producing gearboxes for mines to producing gearboxes for wind turbines. Throughout Germany and the rest of the European Union, jobs in renewables already outnumber those in coal.
The thing that struck me most is that the amount of investment that the German government in a variety of ways has put into these communities.
They're using their heritage and their history as an asset to build culture in a place so that they can remember where they've come from, but also look forward to building the community that they want to see in the future.
In a challenging situation when we're facing real risk, we can do two things. We can decide not to fight it, we can decide not to come together, we can decide not to accept and adapt, or we can work on it, you know, jointly, and I see a just transition as the way to do just that.
These cities have shown that life after coal is possible. With this just transition, we can create good jobs and a sustainable future for our communities.
So you said 5 years ago you went there. And so what was the context? And just give us a little bit of a reference. I mean, the situation in the US and the situation in Germany, and what was the the lessons or the ideas you brought back home from there.
Yeah. Thanks, Max. Thanks for the prompt. So, just, maybe just to take a quick step back, because I think that this is an important aspect to know. What the fund works on is solving an economic problem, right? And we are doing that in light of the fact that we all know that we are entering, we're going to be entering a carbon constrained world, and that we need to be really mindful of future economic activity coming from things like fossil fuels, right? I think that that's important to note because, when we started the fund, one of the things that we were seeing was economic distress happening in places all across the United States. And what we felt like, and I actually have been in climate and energy philanthropy for about 20 years now. And what I was worried about as a climate and energy philanthropist, that if we didn't identify and tackle the economic distress that was happening in the front lines, in the communities that were going to be first experiencing the transition away from fossil fuels, and that being coal specifically, then there was going to be essentially a political backlash, and we would never be able to build broad-based political support for climate solutions, right? So I say that because our work is focused on an economic problem. We are looking at how you can create local economic wealth for these communities, how you can strengthen and diversify the local economy and the workforce. And it really is, I would say, the way in which we work, it's thinking about and using economic development as a driver for stronger climate policy, right? So that is just, again, a little bit of background about just this issue and how, our primary goal is thinking about, improving economic outcomes. So again, just to take a step back, for those of you who don't know us, we are a national fund. We work across the country, and you can think of us as a hybrid. So what that means is that we do two things. So we, one, make direct investments in communities that are hard hit. And then the second aspect of our work is we provide technical assistance, which is essentially transition planning support. So what that means is that in communities all across the United States, across Colorado, for example, there are people and local leaders and community groups that are struggling with a closure has been announced, and they're often paralyzed and aren't sure what to do. So they're looking for success stories, they're looking for best practices, they're looking for what's worked elsewhere, and that's what my team does, right? We connect them to those things. Just a couple of things about the JTF before I turn it back over to Max, because it sounds like the video might be working, is that we really focus on the communities that are economically hardest hit and have the most vulnerable and historically disadvantaged populations. And we believe that solutions must be community driven and built from the ground up. So that, again, just says a little bit about who we are.
Excellent. Thank you, Heidi. So we have another speaker here in the room from actually Boulder, Colorado, David Takahashi. I would like to ask you to step up to the podium. You ran actually just for office in a campaign just a few days ago, ended here in Colorado for city council. You're very active as a climate activist and community activist.
Yes, and I'm also a working member of the Regenerative Coalition, the energy, the workforce, and the regenerative business groups. So I'm here to talk to you about decolonizing fossil fuels. And when we talk about how we might do that, I have this image of the world as body. So if you think of the world as body, the forest are the world's lungs, and the wetlands are the world's kidneys, and the rivers and oceans are the world's circulation systems. And the mycelial network is an underground central nervous system. And we are faced with, where is our place on the body? And what I have come up with is that we as people are very, our role could be as the world's body's immune system, the antibodies that are constantly monitoring situation and looking for threats. And one of the big threats, of course, is climate change, and which is the result of treating our air like fossil fuels sewage system. So if we start to look at ourselves, our movement as antibodies fighting a threat of increasing accumulating greenhouse gas emissions, then we are faced with, well, okay, then what? And how we would be able to mobilize. Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that fossil fuels have got to go, period. So if we use that as our basis, then we have a roadmap, and the possible roadmap goes through electrification of everything. And how do we electrify everything? Well, there we have some choices. One of the choices is the idea of, well, what happened in World War II? And what happened in World War II is a threat was identified and the world mobilized rapidly. You cannot hear. So the world mobilized very, very rapidly. And so the idea is that if the world identified what is happening is the, if you think about the, our current situation of melting glaciers, of overfished ocean stock, of heat waves, of flooding, of if you think of these things as the results of having been invaded from aliens in outer space, we would not be so complacent about solving these things. We would go after the threat. So if you start to look at the results of the colonization of the Earth as an invasion from outer space, then we can start to say, well, perhaps our path forward is through the idea of decolonization. So again, if we go with this war metaphor, it would be the mobilization around World War II and what John Kerry calls World War Zero. Okay, going to zero net energy. If you don't like the war metaphor, I suggest we go with Gandhi and his Salt March and his idea of civil disobedience and satyagraha, which again recognize that there is something we're being colonized around. It was salt. In our case, it's going to be fossil fuels, and that there are alternatives to paying out, we can just walk the 240 miles to the ocean and we can create salt. And that's what they did. So we have this idea of, well, we can do this mobilization or we can do the civil disobedience. And basically what we're talking about is really changing the model. And the central model of the last century, where high entry costs has been superseded by the situation where we have cheap fossil fuels, but high long-term costs versus high opening costs for renewables, but low maintenance costs. And building a new model around this decentralized job creating ecology. And how much time do I have? 2 minutes. Okay, so what I was going to show you is a slide of a grove of trees in southern Utah. It's called the Pando Forest. It has been in existence for 80,000 years. What is notable about this Pando Forest is that it is sensing through this mycelial network where there is scarcity and where there is abundance. It could be water. And what the Pando Forest has done for 80,000 years is moved water from where it is abundant to where it is scarce. And it will do the same thing with nutrients. And in this awareness and action, it has actually shown us how we could be sustainable for 80,000 years. And so that is my hope for all of us here. We are trees in this Pando Forest. We need to be establishing our underground mycelial networks, and we need to be aware of where there is abundance, where there is scarcity, and sharing our resources. Thank you very much.